Want to unravel a sweater but don't have a yarn winder? Keep on watching. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Domino and I like making things from scratch and doing things myself. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to unravel a sweater for the yarn using nothing but a pair of scissors and optionally a Sharpie or a pen that has this tab. But as I said, it's optional. All you really need is a pair of scissors. Ideally, a small pair of scissors would be more helpful, but if you don't have that, a larger pair of scissors would be fine. Before we get started, one thing to look for in a sweater if you do want to unravel them. When I do this, I look for materials that are either natural, hard to find, or just more expensive, or even if it's acrylic, just like a soft, nice yarn that you would want to use, you know? So that's the number one thing. And then also, really important, is to make sure that the sweater that you find has seams that are like this, rather than a seam that has been serged together, because that will not be usable yarn. It'll come out in threads and it will be all disjoint. And of course, you're looking to make a ball of yarn, so you want it to be continuous. So, seams, that's a big one. Seams. Check the seams. I am back home in New York right now, and I don't have any of my normal equipment. I don't even have a seam ripper. This whole process actually started before I left for New York, where I washed this, hand washed it, and dried it, so it's all clean and ready to go. Ideally, I should have used a detergent that is meant for wool, so I might actually do that again when I get back. Once you've done all that and you have washed the sweater, it's time to start taking it apart. I'm going to turn this inside out and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is take the tag off. You can just cut through the stitches that hold it in place. And I like to keep the tag so that you know the care instructions and you also know the material that it's made out of. So then I just like to lay the sweater flat and see how it's constructed. The direction that you start unraveling is very important. You can tell by looking at the direction of the chains. So if the little V's are pointing upwards, then you want to follow them up to the top and start at that end. There are usually little ends that you should untangle before you start unraveling, because it makes it a lot harder if it gets all tangled up in the yarn that you're trying to pull. Now, of course, there is the big obvious seam, but then on the side of it, there's also going to be a little chain with small little V's, and that is actually what you're going to want to pay attention to. So we're going to cut one of the closest V's to the top of the seam that we can find. On the other side of the chains, there are corresponding bumps to each stitch. So we're basically going to want to pull on those until we find which one is the free thread. Now, this specific sweater is a little bit felted, so it was a little bit harder to untangle the loose thread. So if you're in that boat as well, just have some patience and try to pull on the thread and see where it's coming from and try to untangle it as much as you can without ripping or cutting. If your yarn is kind of like a stickier yarn, for lack of a better word, like mohair, or like mine, slightly felted, it's easier to try and pull it apart a little bit and take some of the stitches out manually instead of trying to rip it out immediately. That way you can get a finger through, and that helps you to actually be able to find the thread and also just start the initial pulling of the thread. So once you have the thread, really all you have to do is pull it, and at least in theory, it should come undone unless it's getting stuck to itself, which of course you'll have to go a little bit slower. But then you should just be able to pull it all the way out until you're at the bottom, and you'll be done separating that panel. So at this point, we have undone one of the seams for the main panel. Now you just want to repeat the same process for the sleeves, and sometimes they have a couple more seams, but you just want to find the top of them, cut in the same way, and then separate them also in the same way that we did for the main panel. And then once you do that, sometimes the corners are a little bit tricky. They get a little bit tangled up, especially if you cut the thread not exactly at the last loop, but that's okay, because my motto is do your best and cut the rest. Even if you do cut through a couple loops, it'll be very minimal because it'll be at the top of the panel anyway. Do your best to untangle it. If you're not getting anywhere, you can just cut through them. It's fine. Now, by some editing magic, I have disassembled the sweater, taken all of the panels apart, so now it is time to start unwinding. Some of our panels actually were joined together with a live edge, probably grafted or something like that, but that makes it a lot easier because we don't have to go digging for the knot. Some of our panels are not live edges, so I will still get to show you how to do that. So let's start with one of our panels that does not have a live edge. We can tell that this piece is knit from the bottom up because of the direction that the stitches are facing. Again, the V's are facing right side up, so we're going to start from the top. We're gonna have to figure out what side is the right side, basically by unraveling these little edges that we've been dealing with. If you can undo the knot, great. Otherwise, just cut it. It's totally fine. You're not gonna ruin anything by cutting that little piece. If you find the free end and you're on the right side, you should be able to give it a little pull and it will come undone. If it continues to make knots over and over again and you have undone them and undone them, then you're on the wrong side and you should start from the other end. Mine personally has been giving me a little bit of trouble because it is, again, a little bit felted. The top edge might be a little bit more difficult to unwind than the rest of the sweater, and that's okay.
Now, for the pen method, we take the cap and we take the yarn and we just loop the end of the yarn through the cap. That is so that we can keep hold of the center pole. Further down the pen, I'm just going to hold it with my finger and then wrap it a couple times. Now, the key to making a cake is wrapping it diagonally, continuously, and then also rotating as you go. I am going to start from the bottom, diagonally across the top, and I'm just going to wrap it a couple times like that, and then turn it.
And essentially that's all we're going to be doing until we reach the end of our panel.
As you can probably tell, that took quite a while. It already takes a while when you have a yarn winder, and then even longer if you don't. We have our first cake, and it's not perfect, but it's a pretty respectable yarn cake if you ask me. For the final reveal, I'm just going to push the top down and pull the Sharpie out, and we have our yarn cake. And it's perfect because this is a flat side, so we can stand it up and we have a center pole. I don't know why I'm so surprised, but that's so exciting. I've never actually successfully made a yarn cake before. Okay, let's move on to the next method. I am going to do this with the neck piece, which is going to be a smaller ball of yarn, but it's going to be quick, which is good because I don't want to do this anymore for tonight. So this one, all you need is your fingers. We're going to be attempting to make another center pole cake. So let's get started.
The first thing we're going to do is find the end of our yarn, and we're going to hold it with our hand, and then we're going to take the rest of the yarn and wrap it in a figure 8 style around our index finger and our thumb a couple times until we have a nice volume. Then we're going to pinch our fingers together and pull those two pieces of yarn off, but keep hold of it and also keep track of the end of the yarn. And then we're just going to secure it by wrapping it a couple times. And then we're going to follow the same pattern that we did with the Sharpie, where we're going to go diagonally across. We're going to also rotate this ball as we did with the Sharpie, and again just continue that until you reach the end of the panel. I also kept hold of the end in my hand just so it didn't get lost in the rest of the yarn cake.
This one is a little bit more difficult to get started, and it's also a little bit more difficult because you really have to pay more attention to the tail if you want it to actually functionally be a center pole. Because as of right now, I mean, it's working, but I feel like I should actually fish the tail out of the top for it to, you know, not get tangled or anything. So that is my word of advice for that method. But both did work, and we do have 2 center pole yarn cakes.
I did end up doing the rest of the panels, and I'm going to share with you what I found. I did each one slightly differently, although I did follow the same method with the Sharpie where I was wrapping them diagonally. I did play around with how often to rotate the Sharpie and also where I should actually be placing the diagonal ends. And so each one yielded a different shape, which I will show you guys. So I finally finished unwinding the whole sweater. Here is our first ball that we did with the Sharpie, and as you can see, it's a little bit taller than a normal cake would be, and I have found that not only was it because instead of rotating the ball continuously, I was kind of wrapping it a couple times and then turning it, but also because I was, instead of just going to the edge, I was going diagonally all the way from the bottom to the top, and that creates more of this tall shape and also kind of a round bottom. So beware of that. This is the ball that we used without the Sharpie, and it is a little bit more difficult to make the center pole that way just because you have to be really aware of the end when you're doing it that way.
Otherwise, it will just get stuck at the bottom and you're gonna have to pull it out the top, which is fine. You can still do that, but it makes it a lot easier if you have a Sharpie. It's actually kind of funny. You can kind of see the progression of the balls of yarn as I was going. So this was the next one that I did, again with a Sharpie. And you can see the top is a little bit more squared off, but still a little bit tall and still kind of round on the bottom. And we have this next one, which is a little bit more of a cake shape. Still a little bit tall, but a lot better. And then this is the last one that I did, which is more of your typical cake shape. And that is the way that I just described. You have to turn it more continuously and also go from more of like the edge to the edge instead of the bottom to the top. Either way, you're going to come up with a nice center pull ball that has one flat end. So that's always good. But if you're looking for your classic cake, that is the way you should do it. Okay, now let's talk about unwinding without a yarn winder. Of course, it's going to be a lot more hands-on than it would be otherwise because you have to pay attention to where you're wrapping the yarn, especially if you want it to be a nice cake. Of course, you can just make it into a ball of yarn and not really think about it as much, but then you're gonna have a ball and not a cake, which is, fine, unless you really want a center pull. So then I would use this method. Now, of course, when you unwind sweaters, it's a long process, no matter what, but it is a lot more automatic with a yarn winder. I don't have one, so I actually don't know from experience, but I do just have the feeling when you don't have to think about where you're wrapping the yarn. Of course, you can do it a lot more quickly, and also you don't really have to think about it as much. Why spend money on something when you can just do it yourself, right? So you don't need a yarn winder to have a nice cake of yarn. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that it was helpful and that you feel inspired to unwind your own sweater, even if you don't have a yarn winder, because you get nice yarn and you save something from going into a landfill. So really, there's no downside. And don't let a yarn winder or the tools that you don't have hold you back. Anyway, stay tuned to see what I do with this yarn, and I'll see you guys next week.